I'll give it a few seconds before I say anything. Before I get started, though, just a quick apology. There are little allergy issues dealing with the weather change down here, so it gives me the sniffles. Plus, I have food allergies mixed in with that, so a lot of times I don't know if I'm getting sick or it's the allergy. So I just usually say I got allergies, and that usually covers everything. But it doesn't matter, it's always a fallout. But I'm okay, just got the sniffles a little bit. Hot weekend in sports, man. Started out Friday night with that Jake Paul Tyson fight. We'll talk about that in a minute. High school football, the playoffs are heating up all around the country. Kicked off here in Florida this past Friday. And then you had some great college football action. Georgia got it on with Tennessee in one of the marquee games. BYU, they were in a struggle with Kansas. I believe they held them off. I hadn't got a final report on that. I actually went to sleep on it. But when I did, BYU was up real late. And today you have the epic matchup between the Steelers and the Ravens. So let's start there. The question is Lamar Jackson, has he reached a higher level? I give this guy a hard time, not because he's not a good player. He is a good player. But my question has always been, can he throw the ball when it really counts the most? And you saw in the AFC Championship game last year that when they needed him to make the throws the most, he didn't do it. He had a couple of big plays. They had a couple of things go against them. They were still in the game. So they're always in the game in the NFL because that's just the way the NFL is shaped up. It's not a whole lot of difference between the top team and the bottom team, so they're going to have opportunities. But when you get an opportunity, you can't throw it away. And what stuck out to me was the interception late in the game into triple coverage. Now, if you listen to the announcers, they'll tell you that all these players are the greatest thing since sliced bread. They've mastered everything and they're ready to move on to the next level. But then when you roll the tape back and you see a quarterback who's supposed to be at the top throw an interception into triple coverage, that's just not the way it's supposed to be. And I'm sick about it. And I know he had to be sick because he came back with a vengeance this year. Up to this point, he's played pretty well. I've seen him make some throws that I hadn't seen him make. He got the running game to go with it. So Baltimore has always been dangerous because of his running ability. But when you add Henry to the mix, they become even more dangerous. But like I told you guys before, the blueprint to beat the Ravens are out there. You have to stop the run between the tackles first before you can worry about Jackson. If you get to worried about what Jackson's going to do and you're not stopping the run, now you open yourself up to both poisons and you're going to get killed. That's why you see every now and then the Ravens blow people out because they're running the wrong schemes against them. But Pittsburgh is one of those teams that know how to play against the Ravens. Now, this is the first time that they're going to play against the Ravens with Derrick Henry, but the blueprint is still there. It doesn't matter if you have 3 Hall of Fame running backs in the backfield. If you can't run the football between the tackles, it's not going to matter. And if you stop the Ravens between the tackles, then you control Jackson with his outside runs. That opens it up to where he has to throw the football down the field all the time, not just when you thinking they're going to run the football and you get wide open play action passes. They're going to kill you like that. But Pittsburgh, they pretty much had Jackson's number. He tends to struggle against the Steelers. So he came out this week and said pretty much that he's been working hard to overcome his struggles against Pittsburgh, and you should see a different Lamar Jackson today when they play the Steelers. Well, my thought to that is, let's see, game on. Pittsburgh know the task that they have. They have a pretty good defense. Their offense is improving. So I'm expecting another slugfest between those two teams. If there aren't any major turnovers or a whole lot of turnovers, it should be a nip and tuck game. So what you should look for when these two teams play is, how do the Steelers defend the Ravens with Derrick Henry? I told you guys at the beginning of the season, the Ravens are going to do great, because as I lovingly call them, the regular season Ravens, because they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to play against some teams that don't quite match up, and then they play the wrong scheme, and it's going to make them look like they're all great. They've done that offensively, but defensive, they have a lot of problems. They got a lot of holes in that secondary. They went out and made some pickups during the trade deadline to try to improve that. But the other problem that they have, they seem to make a whole lot of untimely penalties on the offensive line. I won't respond to that yet. They tend to make a whole lot of mistakes on the offensive line. So Baltimore, they got to fix those issues that they have if they hope to make it deep in the playoffs. In fact, if they even make it to the playoffs. But we'll see about that. But Pittsburgh, like I said, is one of those teams that know how to defend the Ravens. And it's going to come down to the day to see if Jackson has really improved his passing game, because Pittsburgh is going to slow that running game down. And it should be a test to see exactly where he is. Now, that's not to say that, hey, Henry could come out and have a monster game. He's had a good game against Pittsburgh before, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they won't have a big game today. I'm willing to see just how Pittsburgh matches up with the Ravens against Henry. But he came out and said that he aims to get over the Steelers hump, and he pretty much warned the Steelers that this is going to be different this year. And just like the Steelers probably said, well, let's see. And about 30 to 45 minutes at 1 o'clock, we're going to find out. Now, that's just one game today. It's been reported that the Jaguars are set to fire Doug Peterson if he don't win today's game against Detroit. Now, as you know, Detroit is probably the best team in the NFC, and that is a tall task for the Jaguars, especially since they don't have their full cachette of weapons. Trevor Lawrence, the starting quarterback, he's going to be held out again today, so it's up to Mac Jones. Now, the fans, they've been clamoring for Mac Jones to get on the field. This is his opportunity to do it. Again, he didn't do very much last week, and as the fans clamored for him, I asked them straight up, you guys wanted Mac Jones, you got him. What do you think about him? They said he's no different than Trevor Lawrence. So it just, like any other fan, they just be talking. But the reality is the Jaguars have some problems on the offensive side that they need to clean up. Going all the way back to the coordinator. Now, if you recall, the defensive coordinator last year got fired. They fired him instead of the offensive coordinator, and he made it a point to say that he wasn't the reason. And the Jaguars defense is actually pretty decent. They had some injuries early in the year that made them look worse than what they really are, but now that they're getting some of those people back healthy, they're playing some pretty good ball. So it's the offense that's holding the Jaguars back, just like the guy alluded to when he was on the way out the door. So, he's laughing somewhere, but it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it's all about feeding your family, and these guys in any pro football team, they are getting paid and they're taking care of their family, so that's all that really matters. Now, scaling back a little bit. Yesterday, Georgia and Tennessee got it on, and I asked you earlier during the week, is Georgia really a 10-point favorite over Tennessee? I had to think about that, and I wasn't really sure. But when I thought about the last couple times that Tennessee played Georgia, I noticed that the quarterback for Tennessee, they managed to blow it or didn't show up. They light up a lot of lesser teams, but when they line up against Georgia, they don't do so good. Now, the quarterback actually played pretty well last night, but it was a quarterback who made the deadly mistake to let Georgia back in the game. Tennessee jumped out on them 10-0, man, and it looked like it was going to be a completely different ball game. But they put the ball on the ground. Georgia picked it up, then they marched in to score a touchdown. They scored another touchdown to take the lead. Then Tennessee came back, showed some heart. They took the lead to go up 17-14. Then Georgia tied it. From that point on, the second half, as you know, Georgia's a second half football team, and they got a lot of heart. And they pulled away from Tennessee in the end. The final score was 31-17, which was actually 14 points. So they did cover that 10.5-point spread. But it wasn't like that the whole game. They scored a touchdown in the end to reach that spread amount. But Tennessee, until they can find a quarterback that can consistently put in there against Georgia, they're not going to beat Georgia. And it showed again last night. So what they did was kind of make my predictions come true. There's going to be a team in the SEC championship game with 2 losses. 2. And if Texas messes around and loses to, they got a conference game against Kentucky. If they lose to Kentucky next week, that will put them into the final game against Texas A&M with 2 losses. And if they beat A&M, now you're going to have both teams in the SEC championship with 2 losses. And I kind of saw that coming because there's a lot of back and forth there between all these teams, and they're slugging it out. There's a lot of evenness going on, and I like that. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Texas A&M beat Texas, but it's going to come down to the Auburn-Texas A&M game and the Texas and Kentucky game to determine if they're going to be 2 teams with 2 losses in the championship game. But either way, he kind of opened the door for Alabama, who has that slight edge over Georgia. I don't know how the SEC is going to do the tiebreakers, and without divisions, you could kind of see this coming. But if you're going to have the divisions, you're going to have some of the better teams in the conference that never get a chance to play against each other. So one of the proposals that they had when they were trying to figure out how they were going to do it was quadrants. You play X amount of teams in each quadrant. You're going to play certain teams every year anyway because of rivalries they want to keep intact. But I think with the quadrant model, then you have more of a consistent flow there because Texas A&M, they skipped a lot of the heavyweights this year, and they're going to have the same schedule next year, and it kind of favors them. So if they got on a roll like they've been doing, they stand a chance to be pretty good over the next 2 years. But that remains to be seen. On the flip side, the other SEC power is LSU. They just lost their 3rd game in a row. They got run off by Texas A&M. Then Alabama ran them off with the running quarterback. And then yesterday, surprise, surprise, Florida knocked off LSU using a similar approach. Now, as you know, Florida's been struggling pretty much. I mean, if you want to call 5-5 or 5-4 struggling football team, that's what they are. And they got obliterated last week at Texas because they won 100%. And calls for Billy Napier's job, has been out there all along, but he got a vote of confidence before the Texas game that he was going to be able to come back. So I think the reason for that is because they are playing hard for him. And as you saw against Georgia, they should have beat Georgia. The quarterback got hurt, and they didn't have the quarterback last week against Texas. And then you come back and knock off LSU. Now, if you look at the Texas game, Texas, they aren't world beaters these days. They started out like gangbusters, but Georgia kind of exposed that offensive line. And Arkansas showed you a little bit of that yesterday. They just don't have enough weapons to beat Texas. As much as they hate Texas, and I don't know why people hate Texas, but the people in Arkansas, they despise Texas, even more so than Texas A&M. And I like to ask somebody from that part of the world, why is that the case? But people tend to hate the Longhorns, and I don't understand. But at any rate, I think that it's going to be, you're going to have at least one team with 2 losses. And if Texas isn't careful, they have a chance to lose one of those 2 games, and that'd give them 2 losses. If Texas A&M can get by Auburn, which they should, then that makes the last week of the season very, 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 very interesting. And I just can't wait to see it. But Alabama is the big winner out of all of that 2-loss action because they have the tiebreaker over Georgia. So they're going to end up sliding into the championship game if you got a 2 losses on both sides. Alabama would definitely be into that. But Auburn, again, is the key to all that. They don't care anything about playing against Alabama. And they have a chance to beat Alabama and Texas A&M. So that should be exciting to see how that all plays out. But the other guy that's involved in that is Oklahoma and Brent Venables. Brent Venables, in my opinion, was way over his head. I don't know what they saw in him. I saw the cracks in this game when he was a defensive coordinator at Clemson. All he's doing is blitzing, and when you blitzing, you better hope they get there, because if you don't, you got some people running wide open. And to his credit, most of the time they were successful. He was there doing a successful run at Clemson. But as you can see, like Silvio the Soprano said, some people are better at being number 2s, and it looks like Brent Venables is better at number 2 than the head coach. But he can save his image and his career at Oklahoma if he can beat Alabama this weekend. That would be a feather in his cap and extend him beyond to where he is right now. They don't really want to get rid of Venables because he has a high buyout. Nobody wants to pay a whole bunch of money to a coach that's not going to be there anymore. But some schools, they don't care. If you don't get it done, they're going to get rid of you. Which brings me to LSU. Like I said, LSU, they have lost 3 straight games, and now people are calling for Brian Kelly to be fired. They want Kelly to be fired because, number one, he's struggling with those 3 straight losses, number one. 2, he don't seem to be getting along with the base down there. You know, he's not a Southerner by birth, so he's already got a strike against him with those people. And if he doesn't win or get on a 3-game losing streak like he is, that's a problem. When they find out how much money he's making, that is another problem. And then the teams that you're losing to, Alabama and now a very underrated Florida, that's not very good. Then add to the fact that he seems to be having meltdowns on the sidelines with his players. He got caught on camera last night going off against one of his receivers who didn't properly execute a pass route. He jumped too soon or something like that, and lip readers have said pretty much that he's pretty much saying that the guy is uncoachable, and that's not good for the player if that's the case, because now the whole world knows it, and it's not good for the coach because he just saw you have a meltdown. And like I said at the beginning of the season, if you look at the picture of when Kelly took over LSU and the way he looks now, he has aged considerably. It's almost like a president. They go in there for 8 years, and they look aged tremendously. And Kelly's only been there, 3 years? And he looks very aged for that position. And if a job is killing you, I wouldn't give a damn if they pay you $100 million a year. It's going to kill you. You might as well let it go and let somebody else have it. But if they fire him, if I'm in Kelly's position, hey, fire me, because he's got a $61 million buyout. Unlike some of these coaches, like a Charlie Strong or who else did this? They get fired and they want to go get another job to prove that they are they weren't what people thought they were, and they just had a bad little season or a bad turn with that particular program, and they want to prove to the world that they're a better coach than that. Well, if you fire me, I'm going to take all my money, and I'm going to go sit on the beach, and I'm going to hang out with John Gruden in the Fire Coaches Club, and when I get all my money, then I'm coming back, and I'm going to take me a job somewhere else. But most of them don't think that way. They consider themselves to be high competitors, and they want to win, and they want to show everybody that this is who I really am, and they end up losing money in the process. But I'm going to get all my money. Hey, appreciate it, Dylan Watson. I like my shirt, too. But it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. It's the $61 million buyout that is saving Brian Kelly right now, and I think he's not going to be fired this year, but if he comes back next year and he starts out struggling again, then he's going to be out. Okay, JSG officials say, good day, mate, from Sydney, Australia, just randomly landed you on your live. Well, I appreciate it, Mr. JSG. Subscribe, and I usually go on early in the mornings and sometimes in the afternoon when there's time. Just like the name says, I'm actually back into coaching now. I do a little football. I'm like one of those old-fashioned kind of coaches. I'm doing football, basketball, and baseball. And I usually go year-round with this stuff. But I took 4, 5, 6 years off. Now I'm coming back. I got the bug to coach again. But I got a problem with the way that the state association run things down here. It's not about the kids. It seems to me it's all about the money. And because it's all about the money, the kids get pushed in the background, you know. If you don't know, in Florida now, you can get NIL as a player in high school. The problem with that is the schools aren't supposed to be involved with that. You go out and get your own little deals. And when you have a public school issue down here, they don't have the money that the private schools have. And if it comes to the point where a kid can get NIL deals, what is to stop a private school from reaching out to their business connection, because they got all the business school kids at their schools, from giving some kid an NIL deal from downstate somewhere who's a superstar at a public school. So what's going to end up happening, I see, is the players from public schools are all going to start drifting to private school because they're going to get NIL deals, and it's going to weaken the product that you see at the public schools. Now, they can't get them all, but they can take out a whole lot of them that makes the public school game kind of like Bush League or City League, not high school varsity. And that's just the way I see it going. And then when you add to the fact that they want to try to pretty much cut the legs off public schools in the state by taking public money to fund private schools with vouchers, then you basically trying to end public school. And if the athletes go with them, what's left for the public schools? Nobody's learning anything. It's all about the dollar. Who does that help in the end? But I digress. I don't want to get off into that. But the question is Brian Kelley going to be fired? I don't think he's going to be fired again because he's like, appreciated Dylan Watson, nice chain. Like I said before, his buyout is too high. Same reason Billy Napier really didn't get fired, because his buyout was too high. Florida's already paying several other coaches a lot of money that not coaching anymore, so why add another one? So that's one of the reasons why he stayed in his job. But if he can get some players in there and they keep playing hard the way they are, and especially if they knock Ole Miss out next week, then he'll really be loved down there in Gainesville. And the way Florida State is playing, that's another fly in the ointment. As bad as they are, they still can show up at the last game of the season and beat Florida. And that wouldn't be good for Napier, whether he got the vote of confidence or not. All right, and finally, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. I sincerely hope you guys didn't think that was going to be a real fight. Tyson got in the ring and he fought for 8 rounds, 2 minutes apiece, and he didn't throw 100 punches. He threw 98 punches and only landed 17. That lets you know right there that that wasn't a real fight. Jake threw 3 times as many punches as he did, and with the 14-ounce gloves, nobody was really going to get hurt anyway. But the beauty of it all, they attracted 65 million viewers, and not only that, Jake took 40 million and Tyson took 20 million. Well, who in their right mind wouldn't take that kind of money if you were offered that opportunity? Now me, I'll step in the ring with Jake Paul, and I saw his brother Logan Paul fight. I'd fight him too. He just got them long arms. If you don't get caught on the end of that jab, you could compete with either one of these guys. But I don't think none of the fights that Paul has been winning has been real. You know, I think because of his brilliance at marketing, I think Paul goes to these guys ahead of time and cuts the deal, say this is how we want these fights to go. And they go just like it's planned. They get a whole bunch of viewers. They hype it up by calling each other names. Same kind of stuff you see on TikTok and everywhere else. The garbage is what gets all the views. And if you can go and talk all the trash you want, you can get people to come watch until they realize, hey, I've been had. Too late then, I got your viewership, and I got your money if you paid for a viewership. But in reality, if Paul was serious about being a fighter, he would go sign up for somebody who's about his age, and it can be something that he can show that he can really fight. Now, Enlightened Sober Drunk said boxing is what the world WWF used to be, entertaining but not real. Well, in Jake Paul's case, that's true, but not in the real fighters. You know a real fighter when you see one. I think some of those fights have been fixed. You take, for instance, they had a guy that had a championship belt a couple years ago, and his promoter talked them out of giving up his championship belt so he can somehow get better fights and win the belt back. Well, that didn't happen. He never won a fight again, as far as I knew. But why would you talk your own fighter into giving up a championship belt? That lets you know how rotten the game can be. That it was a gimmick fight. Yes, it was a gimmick fight. But I think if you take the history of Tyson, and if he got in shape and he was really doing all the stuff that you see all those training videos he was doing, he'd kill Jake Paul. So Jake Paul, you know, he's got people thinking he's great. He's taking it serious somewhat, and he's putting the work in to train. He's hiring professional trainers and all of that. So you can't deny that he's not working hard to make it look real. But in reality, we know that's just not the case. But hats off to him for being able to generate that money. But I'd rather fight Logan Paul. I saw that guy Logan Paul fight MS1, KS1, or whatever his name, this dude from England. And the fight I saw, both of them should have knocked each other out. But since they didn't have the experience or fighting knowledge, they didn't. And it's even more disappointing to know that Shannon Briggs was in the corner of Logan Paul. He can't show him more technique than what he showed in that fight. Now, KS1, He got inside those long jabs and he was trying to throw some bombs, but he didn't have any accuracy. So if any one of these cats wanted to fight me, I'd step in the ring and fight them. It'd take me a while to get back in shape, but the way I look now would be completely different from the way I would look if I was to get into that ring with either one of them. But the price has got to be right. I step in there for a big payday because, anytime you step in a boxing ring, it don't take but one punch and you could get killed, and especially if you don't see it. And that's happened before, and it's not out of the realm of the possibility that it's going to happen again someday. So if it would pay me enough money, I would step into the ring to fight either one of those three guys. No matter to me. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, I would take it. But anyway, and Alan says, should women be boxing? Yes or no? Well, women fight in the street and actually have some entertaining fights on the street. You don't see any hair pulling in boxing, but there's some women out there very technical, and a lot of women could beat guys on the street, because they train to fight, and if they get the opportunity to get started, they can be a very dangerous opponent to somebody on the street. But as far as the in the boxing ring, I don't have a problem with women boxing, but you just got to understand that you can get beat half to death if you get in there. But if you got a soft heart, don't watch these women fights, because a lot of times it be one-sided. But still makes for interesting competition. Buffalo, Kansas City. Let me tell you something, man. Buffalo can beat Kansas City, but I don't think they're going to beat them today. They always find a way to blow it against Kansas City. But I think if Buffalo can get Kansas City in the playoffs, they got an opportunity to beat Buffalo. Not Buffalo, but Kansas City. They don't, even though they're undefeated, it just don't seem to be hitting on all cylinders like they should be. So this is an opportunity for somebody to take out Kansas City this year. They think they're going to three-peat. Last year they looked the same way, but they got hot at the end. But the thing is, you got to be able to score against Kansas City because the defense is what's really keeping them where they are. Mahomes, he's kind of struggling a little bit. I'm starting to think that maybe the league is caught up to him, and that could play a part. But as you might be aware of, there are defensive coordinators that hold things back. They're not going to show everything in the regular season, especially if they figure to make the playoffs, which is one of the reasons that the Ravens tend to do so well in the regular season, because teams don't reveal their game plan against the Ravens. They show a little bit here and piece there, and then they go and look at their board and they change this and they change that. The same thing Pittsburgh do when they play Baltimore. These teams know how to defend against Baltimore, and they don't tend to show everything they got in the regular season. And I think that Kansas City, Spagnuolo is the same way. So you're going to have to be a little craftier than him to beat them. But right now, Kansas City's got about 1,000 lives, and it's about time for them to get beat. And today, I think Buffalo could be the team to beat them. But if it comes down to a penalty call, Kansas City seems to get all these calls at the right time. So if you can avoid giving up a major penalty against Kansas City, you can beat them. But it's going to be an interesting game between the Steelers and the Ravens. Like I say, these are division rivals. Pittsburgh, they're not intimidated by the Ravens. They don't care how many star running backs they get. But that doesn't mean that Henry can't rip off a big run every now and then. It's possible. But again, you can't focus on Henry and Jackson. You got to take away that inside run first. And if Jackson can get a little 5-10-yard scramble here and there, so be it. But you want to make him into a passer. And let's see if he really improved as a pocket passer to advance his team through the playoff rounds. At this point, he's having a great season. People are talking like he may win the MVP again. He might. So what, as far as I'm concerned? Can you do it when it counts is all I want to know. And today you're going to get an idea about what that's going to look like when they play against the Steelers. Also, I didn't really want to get into it now because of time. I told you guys that there was a historic rematch taking place in high school football in Florida. Riverside High School of Jacksonville. They went to Pensacola to play Pensacola Escambia. Riverside used to be known as Robert E. Lee due to political correctness. They changed the name about 5 years ago, and now they're called Riverside. Everything's the same about the place. They got the same nickname, the Generals, and they added this little international yellow type color, green to the color scheme. But other than that, it's the same old school. But they played Escambia back in 1984. Escambia came to Jacksonville at that time, and they had earned that right to go to Jacksonville by beating Tallahassee Rickers in 3 overtimes on the road. As a reward, they had to go to Jacksonville to play the #1 ranked team in the state with the #1 defense in the state. Well, Escambia had a running back, a 10th grader that you all know now as Emmitt Smith, wearing number 24 at the time. He came in as a sophomore, and he was averaging 171 yards a game for the whole season. But when he didn't play, he missed 2 games. He had 211 yards. So you can imagine the kind of terror he was in high school. But when they came here, like I say, Lee had the #1 defense in the state. And what they did, the coach said that he had came up with a plan to try to stop Smith. Well, lo and behold, the second and third play of the game, Smith ripped off a 40-yard run. Well, he said he scrapped that plan and went back to base. And after 60-something yards in the first half, Smith didn't get 100 yards the rest of the game. And he ended up with 96 yards over 30 carries. And that's the only time that anybody ever held Smith below 100 yards in high school. But what's historic about that game, it was a sloppy game for the most part. And the Achilles heel that Lee had was they were a heavily penalized team. And the field goal kicker missed about 3 or 4 kicks. Well, this game ended up going into 4 overtimes. Lee missed another field goal in overtime. Escambia came on to kick the field goal, and they won, was it 28-25 in 4 overtimes. Now, granted, they won the first game in triple overtime, and they won this game in 4 overtimes. Well, Smith and the Escambia Gators went on to win the state championship that year, and they were due for a rematch against Lee, which would have been in Jacksonville the following year in '85. But Lee had jumped out on Ocala Forest 21-0. They hurt their star running back, and they brought in a sophomore running back, Vince Woodbury, and he ended up coming back and stealing the game. So instead of Escambia going back to Lee, they ended up going to Ocala Forest. And they ended up beating Forest by 2 touchdowns, and that was the closest game they had for the rest of the season as they went on to win 2 straight championships. So fast forward now, those 2 teams hadn't played for 40 years. But what made that game epic or special was Emmitt Smith, he was playing against Leroy Butler in high school. And as you know, both those guys are in the Hall of Fame now. And this is one of the few known instances where you had 2 guys that are Hall of Famers who played against each other in high school. Butler was a junior and Smith was a sophomore. And as you know, they both went to play against each other at Florida and Florida State, and then Green Bay and Dallas. With Butler getting into the Hall of Fame within the last 2 years, I believe it was. So, and there's also a picture, if you go back and look at some of my videos, I didn't put the link in the chat this time, but there was a picture where you had Leroy Butler and Reggie White on the tackle against Smith. So you had 3 Hall of Famers in one shot. That photographer, they hit me with a copyright strike on that. I wasn't trying to get credit for it. I was just trying to put the image out there. But I don't think he realized what he has. He's got, how many times have you seen a shot of pro football players with 3 of them being a Hall of Famer in the same shot? So if you want to see that shot, just go through my thumbnails there on the videos, and you'll be able to find that. It's not very far away. I did that video about a year ago. But this time, Lee or Riverside went out to Escambia, and they played the other night. And just like the first time they played, it was a lot of mistakes made. But it came down to 4th and 10 in regulation. Escambia hit a guy in the back of the end zone to tie the game up, and they go to overtime. Well, Lee scored. Then it came down to Escambia. They needed to tie the game up, right? Well, what ended up happening was they did score a touchdown to make it 28-27. And like the penalty marred affair in Jacksonville 40 years earlier, Lee jumped offside. So now the coach said, look here, man, we're going to win this game right here now, or we're going to lose it. So they ran a pop pass, that jump pass like Tebow used to do, hit an offensive lineman with the greatest hands on the team, and he catches the ball for a split second. They knock it out of his hands, but they call it a touchdown. So Lee loses 29-28, this time in 1 overtime. But Normally when you have these epic rematches like that, it usually come down to the same type of game and the same type of ending, and ended this time dramatically with Escambia winning again. But what I find interesting about it, the Pensacola paper said nothing about the first time these two played, because a lot of these journalists that you have nowadays, they have no idea what they be talking about or what they be covering. Here I am, I'm just a kid, and I'm following this stuff 40 years ago. I know what's going on, and I can still remember what happened. You don't have to believe me. Go back and look at the records, and it'll tell you everything you need to know. Smith took the number 22 when he got to Florida, but his high school number was 24. And all that stuff is in the history books. So if you want to take a trip down memory lane and see how things go, just back me up, see what it says. But the other interesting note about that now, Escambia's field is now called Emmitt Smith Field. So you always have ties historically everywhere you go. But I just thought that was an interesting story. And then when you add to the fact that that picture has those three guys all in that one shot and they're all in the Hall of Fame, it's kind of interesting to me. Now, just to recap, I talked about Jake Paul. He's a master marketer, but is he really a great fighter? I don't think so. But if he can get all these people to get into the ring and make the money like they're making, and he's pretty much re-energizing boxing in the process, hey, more power to him. And Brian Kelley, I don't think he's going to get fired. Now, if he messes around and loses to Arkansas, then he might get fired. That would be like a final straw for him. But because he has a $61 million buyout, I really don't see that happening. And Pittsburgh and Baltimore is going to be a bloodbath, as they call it. It's going to be a battle in the trenches. And we're going to get a chance to see if Lamar Jackson has improved truly with his passing game, because as history dictates, the running game is not going to be as prosperous today for the Ravens as it has been. As you noticed that the Bengals pretty much slowed Henry down both games. But the Bengals find a way to make mistakes that allow Baltimore to steal both games. But it's very possible that Henry could make some plays. He's done well against Pittsburgh in the past. But like I said, it doesn't matter. If you go out there and run for 200 today, when they count the most, their real game plan is going to show up. But you're going to get an idea about what Jackson's going to be able to do moving forward. If he comes out today and have a great game against Pittsburgh and Henry doesn't run wild, then you'll know pretty much what the playoff picture is going to look like. And Buffalo and Kansas City, their threats. Kansas City, I think that rabbit's foot they've been wearing the last couple of years is going to end up falling out of their pocket somewhere along the line, and it's going to hurt them. But the playoffs are setting up to be real nice, just like in college football. Also, the SEC, you're already guaranteed to have one team with 2 losses in the championship game. And it comes down to how Texas A&M and Texas finish these last 2 weeks, if they're going to be 2 teams with 2 losses in the conference. So I'm interested to see how it all shakes out, and then moving forward into the playoffs. And then in the Big 12, you got Colorado getting stronger out there. I don't know how good the competition is overall out there, but in any case, it's night and day for Dion and his Buffaloes, and they're going to make some noise. If they can get by Kansas not don't have the greatest record, but they're still a threat. If they go beat Kansas up and beat Oklahoma State up, then they are guaranteed a trip to the Big 12 championship game, and then they have opportunity to make some noise in the playoffs, and then we can see just how good those players they have really are. So should be a great Sunday. I try to come back on tonight, give you a recap of what I thought about the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game and everything else that's taking place in the NFL. So until then, you guys have a great sports day. This has been Sports for Real. I'll catch you later on tonight. I'm out.